So we are recording this, and so that you can go back to it, and for other people who were not able to be with us tonight. Again, my name is Jim Miller, and I am the Curricular Support Assistant and the Community Learning Leader for Project Dragonfly. I've been part of the program now for 16 years, which seems crazy. I started off as a student in 2008, going to Costa Rica, and went through the GFP program and went to Costa Rica, Belize, and Namibia. After the program, I continued with Amazon, Mongolia, and Borneo, and then was asked to be a part of the instructional team for Dragonfly and have helped teach courses in Baja, Belize 5 or 6 times, Borneo, and I finally was able to go back to Costa Rica this past summer as part of the instructional team. So after 16 years, it was kind of full circle. But in those 16 years, I participated in EEs in all those years except for one. So I'm glad you're here to join us tonight to learn a little bit more about the four countries, locations that we are going to. Um, we uh, we're going to Namibia, Borneo, Mongolia, and Kenya. Um, and um, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll get started. We're glad you're here. Please use the chat for this session. Please say hello, share your name, location, any of the courses that you're interested in. If you have any questions as we go along, um, some of the speakers will be able to answer, and I will be also monitoring the chat so we can get through them, so we can get through the presentation within the hour. So Earth Expedition courses can be taken as a standalone graduate course, or it could be used for credits towards your master's degree. For the standalone graduate credit, you get 5 credits for the summer term. It's an Earth Expeditions global course. We'll talk about the different locations here in just a second, but usually these are 8 to 10 days in person, and we start online in late April, early May, and then we go through the beginning of August for that summer term. That's followed up by a fall semester option with an inquiry and action project based course. It's a 2 credit course, so it's a little bit shorter in graduate credit wise, but you do an inquiry based project and research. And then we have an action component for what you come up with your results. And that runs at the end of August, and that finishes up usually in the first week in December. Some people do use these credits for going towards their master's degree. And usually you do 1 to 3 of these courses and put it towards your graduate degree. The course costs for 2025 are approximately $3,600. $3,600. The tuition's for 5 graduate credits plus all the basic expenses while you are in the country. Some locations are more, as they have additional fees, as they have additional flights that are necessary for those locations, but they typically include the meals, lodging, activities, and transportation for the whole time that you're in the country, plus 5 graduate credits, which is an amazing deal for 5 graduate credits and all the costs that are associated while you're in the country. We have 16 locations that we go to for Project Dragonfly and Earth Expeditions. The one that's in red is the Bahamas. That is for our winter term in the for January, and that is the only location that is offered during the January winter term. All the rest are during the summer. We have a lot of focus in Central and Southern America. We have some in Asia, and we have two in Africa. Some of them are pretty newer. The Bahamas winter term has been going just for a few years. And our Galapagos adventure is also um, one of the newer ones that we've uh, been working on to expand. So what is an Earth expedition course? It's a chance to spend time in nature, learn more about yourself, and grow with conservationists, um, and create inspiration on how to make positive social ecological change in the world. So we have collected words and less through our surveys, and some of the words, the most popular words that we receive are connections to nature, building community, change perspectives, and overcoming fears. So we have these connections to nature, and we are in the country for just 8 to 10 days. And so we like to maximize our time in the country, getting to see the natural world and connecting that natural world to the concepts that we learned before we went in field in the web-based course. We also like to build community, and I say that Earth Expeditions and Project Dragonfly is probably one of the biggest conservation networks out there, especially for graduate programs. Um, I am still in contact with people that were in my first course 16 years ago. We have watched each other's families grow, and we're still in contact and getting together and traveling and sharing ideas. And it's a pretty amazing connection. Usually, you're in a course with about 10 to 20 students, roughly around 15 students. Um, and then you'll have an instructor and a community learning leader. Um, and then while you are in country, they act as both of your instructors. So, um, Earth Expeditions and Project Dragonfly can be a life-changing experience. Many people have gone in and have changed careers and have gone into the nonprofit world or changed what they were teaching. Um, it is an altering experience. And then we also have overcoming fears. And that's one of the things that we really push for with our experience is to push ourselves and push that comfort zone that we live in. Um, Once we get out of that comfort zone a little bit, that's where the magic happens. And all those experiences that we have and the information that we get during those times, we usually retain them a lot longer and remember them um, for a long time. That's when those awe-inspiring moments, those wow moments happen that we just never forget. Preps and must-haves. Um, so a few of the things that you should be coming into, we have an open-hearted, accepting attitude, focus on simple living and bring less stuff. You will have a course reader with materials that you have to read beforehand, and all of those deal with the location that you are at. So it brings those concepts to life when you're actually in the location and you're like, oh, yeah, I read about that. And we are in the country for 8 to 10 days, and we are coming from all different walks of life and all different areas of the country and in the world. And we all have differing opinions, and but it's also we also have this like-minded urge for conservation and getting together and having a like-minded experience. One of the things we do encourage is bringing less and simple living while we are there. Don't overpack. Have just the one bag, and y- think about your impact of the stuff that you bring to the country, and making sure not to bring any packaging and trash, and bring taking our trash home with us. Um, some of the must-haves: we have 1 to 2 large water bottles. You will have fresh water every day, and we do go on many hikes, and so we encourage you to have 2 large water bottles so that you can fill those at any given time. And then staying hydrated is very important while you are in location. And another must-have is a journal with pens, colored pencils. This You'll be surprised how much you treasure your journal after you're done. It may seem tedious and out of the ordinary and out of the box while you're doing a journal, but I still have mine from 16 years ago, and many of those things I had forgotten about. And going back and looking at my journal, especially on those days when you're having those bad days, and you can look back and see the experiences that you have and just bring them back to life. And your journal really does that. A small set of binoculars. You will be getting yellow tags. If you look at the picture at the bottom left, we have our director, Katie Filan. She has that bright yellow tag on her bag. We travel with those on our luggage and our backpacks, and you'll be surprised how many people recognize them if you're traveling through an airport, or if you're traveling through a zoo or different city. If they don't recognize it, they generally will bring about a conversation. And I was in Costa Rica this past summer for the course, and I was in the Costa Rica airport, and um, someone asked me about what the bright yellow tag was, and that person has since signed up for taking an Earth expedition course for this summer. So you never know when those opportunities will arise, and it's just one way for everyone to look out for each other's bags when we are in country, and also as we're traveling, to recognize people who have been in the program. Other must-haves: hat, sunglasses, sunscreen, rain gear, umbrella. You never know when the weather will change. A variety of clothing. So depending on where you go, um, just want to make sure that you have different layers of clothing. Mongolia and Namibia can be very cold at night, so you just want to make sure that you are prepared for that. Sturdy walking shoes. Um, you'll be doing a lot of hiking. You never know when there are bullet ants around, or venomous snakes, or just making sure that you have those sturdy walking shoes for when you are hiking. A small first aid kit, and it's also nice to talk about and have pictures from home. Some people get homesick easier, so they like to have those pictures. And the people that we meet want to know just about us as we want to know about them. So sharing pictures with them, they love seeing pictures from home and seeing parts of your family and where you work and where you live and where you've traveled to. They love seeing those pictures. So that is one of the things to take with you. Typical day: we wake up early. Our days are packed. They run usually from before sometimes before sunrise, and sometimes they end after sunset. We usually have hikes in there. Sometimes we have bird banding and manatee spotting, and uh, talks from scientists and local experts, and cultural experiences. And we also have in-field inquiry projects where you'll be working individually and with small groups. Um, we'll also possibly be doing community service projects while we are there, collecting data for different scientists. So it's not just a static vacation type setting. It's a totally immersive experience. There is some downtime, and but you have to be strategic with your downtime. I mean, you are in a or in a location for 8 to 10 days, and that's it. That may be the only time that you're ever there, and you just want to take everything in as much as you can and leave there with no regrets. Sometimes we say you can sleep when you get home. So, um, and with that, I'm gonna pass it off to for Namibia and Courtney.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like you've said so much already that is so poignant for all of us that we're going to bring up um, along the way. But my name is Courtney Ryan. I am a GFP grad. During my time, I think I was the third graduating course. So when it was brand new. So I've been part of that evolution, which has been really fun to be a part of. But I went to Belize, Borneo, and Namibia as a student. And then since then, I have taught Namibia, Belize, and I got to pick the long straw. So I get to work with the Bahamas as well as that's getting off the ground. So I feel super spoiled all the time that I get to be a part of that. But for Namibia, I've always told our students when you do these Earth expeditions, I did the three. I feel like one of them really hits your head, usually the first one when you're so open to all of this new knowledge. And then one of them hits your body, where maybe it's physically tolling on you. You're working really hard physically to get through it. And then one of them hits your heart. And Namibia is my heart in these three Earth expeditions. So much. I care so deeply about this program. Um, in Namibia, some things to think about. It's a super long flight. When we get there, we fly into the capital of Windhoek, and we all meet at this hotel there the first morning, and we take buses. We travel by land solely, so we take a bus straight to the Cheetah Conservation Fund. We spend the bulk of our time at the Cheetah Conservation Fund and learning all of the intricacies and the ins and outs of what that is, how it started, why it started, and how it evolved, and how holistic of a program and how community-based of a program that it is. We peel away for a very short time for unadulterated fun. Thank you. You can stay right there for just a minute, Jim. Um, to get over to Etosha, which is a national park, and we just do wildlife watching. We don't sleep much, right? As Jim said, we can sleep when we get home, unless you're a working parent and have real life. We don't ever sleep anyway, so why would we start on an Earth expedition? And then we end our trip at a place called Penduka, which is owned and operated by women helping women through crafts and art and using their skills to support each other. So this is our first picture. You can kind of see these are the students in action. One of the core themes of this is cheetah care and all that it takes to take care of cheetahs that have often been captured or injured, and they need to be re-released into the wild, which is the main goal of Cheetah Conservation Fund, started by Lori Marker, who saw a need, and we all see needs as graduate students in the program, or as you're exploring this program as a one-off. We are looking at, as Jim said, a lot of us have switched careers or redefined who we are, because during these courses, and especially in Namibia, you start to really look inward of what problem in the world do I want to be a solution to? And what skills do I have to be a part of that solution? So when we're at the Cheetah Conservation Fund, we are meeting and learning about genetics and scat dogs and farming and how to ID a predator that's made a recent kill, maybe on a goat or cattle, all the way to bush encroachment and what that means to both wildlife and to people. So the folks that work at the Cheetah Conservation Fund are from all over the world, all walks of life. Many Namibians are employed and working there, but they have a skill that is filling a gap in solving this problem. So it's just a really beautiful way of looking at that from a cheetah care perspective, but the Conservation Fund didn't start right there, or stop right there, I should say, because Lori Marker quickly saw that we also have to learn about farming. You can see that the middle picture on the top, the bush ecology of it. Um, these are all things that we get to learn very much about, but how it is connected to both conservation and the thriving of people. Thank you, Jim. If you could just go to the next slide. The conservation of animals, of course. So as we're a part of this program, we're working in the bush. This is a desert, it's a dry climate, but every day, are you kidding? This is what we're seeing every day as we're doing all of that rigorous 5 credit work. So I don't want to undermine the work side of it, but can you get any more motivated by this is what we get to see and this is what we're working for? So when we're seeing these beautiful animals, from giraffes walking across the street at sunset to a black-backed jackal to cheetahs following our truck to give them some exercise and to work on their fitness when it's time to eat so that they can be released someday. It's just a constant reminder. Number one, it's just fun and awe-inspiring. So keep that in mind, that that's a core part of every part of these journeys and these earth expeditions is yeah, it's really hard work, but look what we're working for. And that's a pretty gorgeous and motivating thing to be able to wake up and know that we're gonna really, you know, work through the hardest of the hard, but then this is what we're rewarded with, and this is what we're working for. So that's pretty cool. And then the other side of it, that with the cheetah care and conservation, um, is also the farming and how Namibian farmers moving from old techniques to experienced ways that may help their livelihoods and earn money and support their families in a new way. And something that's really important, thank you, Jim, if you go to the next slide, is that Lori Marker, who founded the Cheetah Conservation Fund, she never looked at farmers' farming practices or ways of life or their belief systems when it came to wildlife. She never said you're wrong. What she did was experiment through inquiry, right? Through questioning and through trying. She took all of those questions back to the Cheetah Conservation Fund and experimented. Okay, are there better farming practices? What if we added a corral? What if we got guard dogs? How could we learn by experience? How can we challenge perspectives in the most thoughtful ways? But her number one way of making change and bringing impact is through relationship building with local community members. They're the drivers of this all. And if they're not thriving, then nothing conservation based is going to happen. And that's something that she really takes to heart and she drives home with her staff and the values of their systems. But this, of course, we get to see the giraffes and we get to see the zebras and we get to see major predators in the African landscape. But knowing that this is where humans started, right? That this land is where it all began for us. And we get so We get the time to really build relationships with the people. We're eating dinner with them, we're cooking with them, we're doing real work, and then we're celebrating and playing with them too. So these 10 days, by the time you walk away, you know Iggy by name and by heart, and you feel so in love. And you know that Johann is going to say things that are so controversial to the way your brain thinks, but he's still right. So just knowing these people, these Namibians that are working hard with the land and for the land so that people and animals thrive together is the most beautiful, beautiful part of the Namibia Earth Expedition. Thank you, Jim. If you could go one more time, just for all of the um, logistical side of things, because with the climate, these tend to be what the most questions that people have. But the climate, it's dry desert air. So during the day, we're 70s, kind of warm, light layers. But then, as Jim was saying, it gets quite chilly, right? When that sun goes down, we are talking about low 40s at night. So we are bundled up. We're living in little huts, as you can see here. We're usually sleeping 2 to 4 people. Sometimes it can be a little more. When we go to Etosha, we're either not sleeping because the stuff that you see at the water hole is too good. Why would you ever go to bed? Or you can sneak off into a tent and get a little bit of sleep before we jump back right into it. Um, our toilets are Western toilets. Um, and our showers are typically open air. So, although private, you get to look at the stars, which are the most incredible thing that you'll see when you see no light pollution and no air pollution and, you know, a galaxy right above your head while you're taking a shower. The activity level is moderate, I would say. Those of you that have been on it, Jim, you could probably agree with me. We do have some hiking, we do have some walking, but for the most part, and they're a little bit longer at times, but nothing rigorous. It's not fast paced, it's not giant hills. And then we do have some hikes that are optional. If you wanted to do a sunset or a sunrise, we give options for that as well. You can see that our buses and transportation tend to be open air safari vehicles, of course, when we're doing some wildlife spotting. And then when we have those greater spaces to cover, we'll just be in a pretty plush bus. So that feels super cozy. Our food is Americanized, but it's very meat heavy. So game meat, you can think about game meat. It'll be it will be cow or beef, but then also there'll be some game that they've gotten. And then um, veggies on the side, but they've been very good about all dietary needs. So they bump up the veggies and the rice for the vegetarians and vegans. We've had gluten-free folks that have had their bellies filled each and every meal. So as far as that goes, um, for this course, the weather and the physical activity, the comfort of it is at a space that all people could enjoy. I think that's really important to say. Yeah, so there's animals and there's education and there's people and really yummy food and a good hut that you get to know people very well in as well. If you have any questions, that I'll stick them in the chat and I would love to see you in Namibia.
Jim, you're muted if you're saying something right now.
Thanks, Chris. I was going to share something with from Portuguese presentation. Um, so in the lower left-hand corner, Courtney, you can see this is my bush block. These are prepared from the acacia trees. And this I got this from the class in 2010. I still have it, and I use it as an example in my classroom. I teach AP Environmental Science here in Cleveland, so I use the bush block from 14 years ago. So I
I
just wanted
still
to
have
pass.
mine in my living room by my fireplace from 2012, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
So
these things about Earth expeditions that even a block of crushed wood kind of feels sentimental to us. Yeah, it's good.
and now we'll have Chris Corpus talk to us a little bit about Borneo.
Yeah. Before I do, I noticed there was a question in the chat about where to fly into Namibia. I don't know if you want to answer that in the chat, Courtney, or if you want to respond now. But I can keep going about Borneo in the meantime.
I'll
Um,
stick it in the chat so you can keep moving.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Chris Porpoise. I was the community learning leader on the Borneo expedition this year. I'm also a Dragonfly graduate. I went to Belize, Amazon, and Mongolia as a student, and then I taught the Mongolia course, the Costa Rica course, and the Borneo course in some of the years post-graduation. I also taught like a couple of weird COVID years, and those we're all trying to forget those years because that was mostly just online. But Borneo is a pretty amazing, spectacular place. It's really unique. I mean, I guess all the Dragonfly expeditions are really unique, but this one really stands out to me if you're someone who's really interested in field work and getting to really try your hand at a lot of different types of field work. Each year is different from the year before because it's all based on, or a lot of the work you do in the field is based off of what researchers are there at one of the field sites that you would go to in this course. So, you know, it could be that there are researchers there working on crocodiles or snakes or monkeys and gibbons, orangutans, elephants. You never really know exactly what you're going to be doing until you get there because we don't really know what researchers are going to be there doing field work until we arrive. So it's kind of this cool opportunity to try all sorts of different stuff and really try a lot of different field techniques when you're out there. So Jim, if you want to go to the next slide, this is a really amazing, spectacular place for biodiversity. You get to see some of the rarest animals in the world there. You can see several of them on screen here. We've got pygmy elephants that we got to see and learn a lot about the conservation work for those elephants. And even you can see this one here has a tracking collar. So there's a lot of hands-on practice and learning around human wildlife conflict and really getting to see what it takes to work with the local community and how they balance their needs with the needs of the animals and the needs of the forest and the economy and all the pieces that all have to be working well in order for all things to thrive. And so it's a really cool opportunity to get to see that for things like elephants, for orangutans. There's a lot of discussion around palm oil, which I know we've probably all heard about. And um, some of the thoughts on palm oil will probably be challenged when you're out here because um, there's a lot of changing understanding of the conservation of the region and how palm oil is a part and a detractor of different efforts. And so um, it's a really interesting opportunity to get to learn on the ground with the communities who live with these animals and who are surrounded by um, the efforts to both control and expand palm oil industry. And it's fascinating to learn about that directly from the people involved in all sides of it. Um, What else? Yeah, so there's proboscis monkeys. This is the only place in the world you'll find those. There's 6 different species of hornbills if you're a birder, and you get to see almost all of those. If you're a primate person, we saw 8 different species of primates and got to participate in several pieces of research related to those. One student got to do some flying squirrel research while they were out there. So there's a lot of really cool things. and also sun bears. So getting to see one of the rarest bears in the world too, that was a really, really wonderful thing to get to experience and see all these different animals, and they're like there with you. So this photo of the elephant was in the section, a little offshoot of the river that we travel up and down on a daily basis. This elephant was just cooling off in the water, maybe 150 yards away from our campsite, our lodging area. And so those trackers are part of how they make sure that people are safe as the elephants are migrating back and forth along the river throughout the seasons. And so we got to see some of that and participate in some of that. And that photo of that orangutan right there was outside of the cabin that I slept in. So you are right there in the middle of very dense, old growth rainforest, getting to experience this while also being directly across the river from a palm oil plantation and seeing what it looks like where habitat has been changed and some of the really fascinating ways wildlife is living back and forth in between those two spaces. So for anybody who's interested in wildlife, this is definitely a great place to add to your sightings lists and to get to participate in a lot of research. If you go to the next slide, Jim. Oh yeah, so this year there was someone who was doing some pangolin research. So a handful of the students actually got to see a pangolin in the wild when they got to help do some of the tracking to follow 5 different pangolins that this researcher is studying. And that's another one of those animals that the percentage of people on the planet who get to see them is so minute, and to be able to see them in their natural environments is even smaller. So it was pretty amazing, and I can't guarantee that the researcher will still be there next year working on pangolin conservation, but they are endemic to that area, and they are in the research area that we work on and do some of the habitat restoration work. So thinking about some of the work that gets done also, so not just, I love this course because it's a little bit of choose your own adventure and students getting to kind of pick and choose which researchers they might collaborate with and get to build some inquiry projects around while we're out at the field site. But we also take some time to participate with some of the conservationists who are doing a lot of community-based work and a lot of habitat restoration work. And so you can see some photos here of some of the students from this year getting to participate in some habitat restoration where they're protecting some of the trees that have been planted to help redevelop the forest, where they're creating a corridor for orangutans passing in between all of the palm oil plantations. And so you can see we got to plant some trees, we got to do some maintenance and work with the all-women conservation group that does all of the field work for this habitat restoration project. But as we are hiking around and doing all that, there's still wildlife everywhere around us. And that photo in the middle is where we estimate maybe the night before or some small number of hours before the elephants had actually passed through. So those puddles are all elephant footprints that the student Sage is standing next to. So it's tons of evidence of wildlife all around. Now, I wrote this description of the class sort of heavy because one of the things that many of the students on this trip said, that this was the toughest EE that they'd been on. And I, having been on several EEs and having traveled to most of the EE locations in my work outside of the Dragonfly program, I would agree that this is probably the most difficult that I've participated in. I've been in rainforests all over the world. This one was the most hot and the most humid. There's something about where it's positioned and near the equator and where it is in the ocean and how weather and climate is moving around them, but that air does not move. So that hot, humid air just sits on top of you, and it is 90 some odd degrees outside and humid, and the air's not moving unless you're on the boat. It's strenuous. It's lots of hiking, both early in the morning, late at night. some of the researchers were going out at 2 a.m. to do their work. So students were, getting up at 1 a.m. to get ready and go out with them. This photo of the mountain is one mountain that was super slippery and super steep. We had to kind of cling to this rope as we climbed up it. Definitely not OSHA compliant, but it was an awesome hike to see this amazing bat cave that was up there too. It was really, really cool. But it is something to think about. We had a couple students that could not keep up with the hikes, and so they had to. They ended up opting out of some of the hikes that we went on and some of the research work just because they were physically struggling with it, and so we had to do some accommodations for them to try to work on some stuff back towards the campsite. So that's something to think about while you're out there. There are it's all shared bedrooms and bathrooms in all the locations. This year, we spent the first part of the trip in the field site called Danagarang, which is super remote. There's limited to no electricity. At one point, elephants had knocked down the wires in between the generator and the rest of the property. So we had quite a while where we had no electricity. We also had an issue where the elephants had crushed one of the water vats as they had passed through. And so then we had to figure out water at one point. So this is one where like some of it's like real life field work, living amongst the amongst the creatures of the forest, but also like who gets to say they've experienced something like that? It's pretty remarkable. The other half of the trip is spent in a town called Sukau. And so we are right along the river and we live in homestays with local families who this is part of their ecotourism um, income is housing people who visit the area and do all sorts of ecotourism trips and projects. So we also stay with local families. Typically it's 2 to 4 students with a family and stay there for several days and nights. And you really get embedded getting to see what life is like for these folks in this community. Many of them work for Hutan, the local conservation organization, which is, I think, one of the premier, if not the best, orangutan conservation organization in the world. So you really do get embedded with people and get to learn what it takes and what are the real needs of people when thinking about community-based conservation. So that's a really cool experience. Several students this year did struggle a lot with the food. It is mostly meat and noodle diets, lots of curry. There's very few Americanized food options. So even when we had the opportunity to take some students to a grocery store to pick up some food items for themselves, they were sort of limited to buying crackers and sort of like beef jerky and some other items like that. There wasn't stuff that they were used to eating, and so they did struggle a little bit with the dietary change. There are a lot of vegetarians in the region, but it's not sort of typical vegetarian food that the variety of vegetarian food that you might have available in the United States is much different. So it did take some of the students by surprise in thinking about the food options, but um, certainly the food was delicious and you're well fed. So if you don't have extreme diet needs, this is a good option. And then, of course, the transportation is awesomely unique. We spent most of the time traveling by boat up and down the river. And then there was a few van rides in between to either when we traveled from one location to the next. And then if your homestay family happened to be a short distance away from the river, they would drive you to the river each day or to wherever our meeting site was that we would be going out to do the different conservation projects and hikes and things that we did. So it's a really fun way to travel. Getting to be on the boats, we saw so many. The bird lists that everybody had coming back were really extensive, and getting to be embedded with people who spoke little English but really worked hard to come up with ways to communicate with you was really neat. And I think, as Jim mentioned, life-changing for some of the students on this trip. When we sort of had our end of trip time to sit around and reflect and talk about the experiences that we all had, some of the things that people were bringing up most frequently were the moments that they got to spend with the local community members there in Sukau, and they got to do the homestays, but also with the community members who ran the field site that we started at, and um, what it was like to be welcomed so warmly. Even when people couldn't really communicate well with us, we used Google Translate quite a bit to help understand. And even though signage and different things were in languages completely different to our Latin-based languages, um, people were really able to figure it out and use some of the tech that we have to make it a little bit easier to communicate. And so um, I definitely have some new relationships and friendships from folks there that I'm hoping will be lifelong ones, like Jim was talking about, particularly with the community members that we got to meet. I mean, these really are the people who wrote the book on orangutan conservation, the literal books. And there are 3 or 4 of the most prominent orangutan researchers are right there at that site. So that's, if you're a primate person, that is one really cool aspect of this trip. I make this look really difficult just because I want people to understand that it is a strenuous one, but also um, it was one of the most magical places I have been in a long time. The travel there is quite extensive. It took 2 days for me to get to Borneo, um, just because of the nature of when flights come and go. I flew into Singapore and then Kuala Lumpur, and then Kuala Lumpur to Sandakan, which is the closest city to where we end up going. So there are a lot of flights to take, and you do need to play a little bit of a game to find the affordable flights, but there are some affordable flights. But sometimes if you just go to, Kayak or United or American or whatever Qantas, any airline that you choose, if you just plug in going from somewhere in the United States to Sandakan, it comes back as like this scary $5,000 round trip ticket, but it's actually much cheaper when you start to break it up. And if you do participate in this class, there's a whole kind of guide on how to select some flights so that you don't end up paying those crazy, crazy prices. I'm seeing some questions there. What were you
Yep,
saying
we'll
there, Jim?
pretend I think it was just a community-based conservation question. I think we're going to move on
Yeah,
to
please.
Amy's going to talk about Mongolia. We're running a little bit behind, so we'll try to catch up and get you out of here as soon as possible too. So, hi,
All right.
Amy.
Hello. I'm Amy Sullivan. I'm an assistant teaching professor with Project Dragonfly and the biology department here at Miami University. And I had the amazing experience to go to Mongolia this summer. I feel like I should say, and now for something completely different. We were just in the rainforest in Borneo, and now we're going to talk about this wide open landscape that is Mongolia. Depending on how you classify people per land area, Mongolia is one of the least populated. It's either the least or within the top 5 least densely populated countries in the world. And you can get a sense of that from this picture. We're talking wide open landscapes where you really don't see anybody. You'll see herds of horses that belong to people, herds of livestock, but it's not common to see other people. So just this expansive, amazing landscape. And I will back up just a little bit. We fly into Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital city of Mongolia, and the journey from that bustling capital city to these smaller and smaller roads and out into this wide open space is really an amazing journey. Go ahead, next slide, Jim. Yeah, so Mongolia, it's big. It's, got horses and stuff, right? Like I didn't know what to really expect. I had a little bit of an inkling because in many regards, it's very much like the steppe of our Western North America. But it's also very, very different. And so some of the things that you see there, you will see Przewalski's horses, or as we call them in the local language, tak. So if that's something that you're interested in, it's a really cool conservation story of a species that was extirpated from the wild and then reintroduced, you know, I don't remember exactly how many decades after, but it was decades after it went extinct in the wild. So we see those. And I wanted to highlight also, there's that big green kind of empty looking landscape, but when you look closer, it's like you peel back all of these layers. So that bottom middle picture of just like the grassy meadow, there's so many amazing plants. There's lots of amazing insect life. And then, you know, there's some toads, there's some lizards. People who like to bird will enjoy this trip because there are lots of amazing raptors and also other species that we see. And then there's red deer shown in the left-hand middle. Red deer, we saw Argali sheep, we saw red fox and Corsac fox, and then marmots. Marmots are amazing, and in when we go to Hustai, like kind of all over the place. So lots of really interesting small mammals as well. Go ahead, Jim. So, you know, the daily activities are much like in other EEs in that we do a fair amount of hands-on, like going out and collecting, you know, doing our inquiries and then doing observations. So on the right-hand side, upper corner, we are all sitting in a meadow watching talk the Przewalski's horses and, you know, collecting some observational data there. On the left-hand side, we were off collecting some data on birch forests in Hustai National Park and just, you know, on top of a ridge looking out at just this amazing landscape. We stay for the first part, I have a better picture of this later, but we stay in gers, or what we might call yurts. And so we have this dining ger, it's where we eat, it's where we congregate for some of our discussions and for the lectures that we have from leading scientists in the field there. And then we also have, while we're in that camp, the opportunity to learn about the local flora from a botanist that does an amazing job of showing us how to look at the landscape through plants. And that's what's happening in the middle bottom there. And then something that was really cool. Oh, and then we also go out with the wildlife team and look for wildlife. And then the other thing that we do that's a neat and kind of really special aspect of this trip is we have the opportunity to go out and just our driver picks a direction and we drive until we find another ger of a family that just lives out there. That's their life, that's their livelihood. And we get to visit with them. It's a traditional thing that Mongolians do. And so the bottom right-hand corner, one of our groups met a family that herds goats, cashmere goats. That's a major form of income for a lot of people in the area. The group I was in, we happened to come across a shaman. So he showed us like his shaman stuff, and that was kind of cool. So lots of really neat and unique opportunities there. Jim, go ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight the people that we are with the whole time, because basically we load up into vans, we drive out of the capital city, and then we're with this group of people for the whole time. We change locations, but all of us do it together. So in the upper left-hand corner is Mugsog. He's the head of the EE at this point of our in-country partners. And he's a world-known snow leopard researcher, also Pallas cats, also worked with Przewalski's horses. So he's, you know, got all of the conservation and ecology stuff going on for Mongolia. We are not in snow leopard habitat though. So I just want to make that very clear. He does his work in Western Mongolia at other times of the year. But so that's Mugsog. His son Byra is in the kind of middle picture. And he just finished his PhD also in snow leopards. So they're, you know, the core of the research team. Standing in front of the van in the lower left-hand corner is the group of people that are the kind of research technicians for this project. And they go out and they look for Pallas cats, but then they also are the ones that take us looking for wildlife. We see some really cool stuff. And then, like I mentioned, we have a botanist with us. But with all of these people, we have drivers also, we have their families, like a lot of their family members. And so I've highlighted kind of in the middle on the right-hand side, there's like green with some white dots. That's the camp that we stay in for the first part of the trip. And that's it. As you can see, there's really nothing else around. And we're staying with these families. We get to do, we get to eat the food that they're making, but also interact with them throughout the whole time, playing games up in the upper top. And then for most of our students, the highlight was getting to know the kids that were on the trip with us, playing. They love to play Uno. Like that was the favorite game, soccer and all of those things. Yeah, so next slide. Okay, so the climate is semi-arid, which means it's usually quite dry. It can rain. It did rain on our trip quite a lot. I was glad that at the last minute on my way through New York, I happened to see my friend and said, I forgot a raincoat. And she said, take mine. It rained a lot. We had a little bit of flooding. And then after that kind of dried out, it rained some more. And then after that, it snowed. So you can get a little bit of everything, but typically it's pretty dry, warm in the day, cool at night. You'll want a nice warm sleeping bag. So we stay in these gears, and they are authentic. They are, we sleep basically on the ground. We're sleeping on top of linoleum there. And in some cases like wool carpets. And yeah, so you bring a sleeping pad, you bring your sleeping bag. Everybody's in communal space all the time. In terms of sleeping, it's shared sleeping space. Bathrooms are outhouses, except for one night where we stay in a fancy tourist camp, and it's like all the luxury of home. And that's in between this Gare camp, where there is literally no running water. You have safe water to drink, they have water to cook, there's water to wash your hands, but there's not actual running water. And they're outhouses. The next camp we go to, so we start off at that camp, then we go to a tourist camp for a night, and then we go to a camp in Kustai National Park, which is where the Tak are. And the accommodations there are wooden cabins and wooden Gare-shaped cabins with beds. And so it's a step up in luxury, I guess, but the bathrooms are still outhouses, but now there's a sink where there is running water, you can wash your hands, kind of deal. Yeah, food, I included some pictures because people are like, I heard the Mongolia trip has gross food, and that's not true. It's actually quite good. It's very filling. And it is usually some combination of meat, vegetables, and noodles or rice. And the vegetables can range from, root vegetables kind of deal to like pickled vegetables to, kind of a salady type thing. So they do a really nice job of providing some vegetables. And for vegetarians, I'm going to be real. I was eyeing the vegetarian food going, I think I might put myself down as vegetarian for next year because it looked delicious. And then breakfast is usually like a porridge that's unbelievably delicious. It's made with milk and cream, and then biscuits, meat, cheese. It's, like I said, cooked by the research team's families. And then transportation is fun. It's all ground transportation. And so I have a picture of one of the vans that we took. We had two that looked pretty much like this. They're Soviet era style vans. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's an adventure to ride in those vans across the country, because you start out in Ulaanbaatar with paved roads, you get out of the city onto some other paved roads, and then you turn off of those onto dirt roads, and then bumpier dirt roads, and then 2 tracks, and then they're just driving across the landscape. So it's an adventure, and there's a lot of cool like cultural things that happen mixed in with this whole trip. I have to say that it's an unexpected place. It's a magical place. It is a place where just the vastness of the landscape is humbling and inspiring all at the same time. So anyway,
Thank you
that's
so
all I
much,
got.
Amy. All right. And last but certainly not least, we have Jared.
Bring everyone home, and I will go really fast since I know we're at time at this point. Hi, everyone. I'm Jaren, based in Cincinnati at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, and I'm so honored to be able to share with you a little bit about Kenya, which is my favorite place in the world. And this is a picture of this summer I took of our students. This whole course is about taking notes from Maasai experts and conservation experts within Kenya on how to coexist with wildlife while maintaining cultural livelihoods in a changing world. What does it look like to live alongside some of the largest animals, carnivores, elephants on the earth? So we get in and we all meet up together in Nairobi. And then we travel, spend 2 days in Amboseli, spend a couple of days at Amboseli National Park. Then we travel to another spot that we spend the second half of our course, and we come back to Nairobi. That's a quick 9 days of an experience. So Jim, first slide, or next slide there, and the slide you just saw, this is Amboseli National Park. So that we do start off the course really digging into what does a national park look like within Kenya? How is it managed? Who stewards the land? And of course, to see lots and lots of amazing wildlife. I didn't really focus on the wildlife too much in my pictures because like some others have alluded to, people come to Kenya for the wildlife and they end up leaving remembering all of the people that they met. Much more leaves an impact on their hearts. But Amboseli, we are out on a big overlander bus and just seeing the park and all its different corners, and getting to spend time with different researchers within and outside of the park. We stay at a game scout campground, and we get to go on a ranger walk with the rangers. And so just again, really looking at how is a national park within Kenya managed, and what does it take to live and work within that park and live right outside of that park. But then we get on a plane, and next slide. And yes, we are one of the courses that we do get on tiny planes in the middle of the course. So we do have an extra fee as part of Kenya because of that. We take this awesome tiny plane over Amboseli National Park to our final location for the course. Otherwise, it's a 45-minute little plane ride. Otherwise, it would take us about 10 hours to drive there based on the road systems in Kenya. So a lot of benefits to that tiny plane. And it's a great time. And then we really get to dig into this place called Old Karamatian. It is this remote, in Amboseli, you're going to run into lots of tourists, and it is a more touristy national park. But out in Old Karamatian, it's in the middle of the Great Rift Valley, out in the middle of the nowhere, and it's lovely. And in this location, we are spending a lot of time with an organization called Soralo, South Rift Association of Landowners. They collectively manage about 15,000 square kilometers of landscape, managing land with all of the different Maasai communities that have joined Soralo and said, yes, we are going to work with you to manage our land collectively. And when we are spending our time there, learning from the Maasai community members, learning from the Soralo staff, how does pastoralism, how does that livelihood actually support conservation? And we get to dig into their ecology research that they do there, and then all of the different coexistence measures that they take to make sure that the people stay safe and are able to maintain their livelihoods while also growing populations of lions, growing populations of African elephants, and many other species that are there in the landscape. Next slide. Last one, bring it home. So our climate in Kenya, especially the places that will be, in Nairobi and in Amboseli, it can get colder in the night when the sun goes down. Nairobi, actually, I'll have a long sleeve shirt on and pants on even during the day, because it's up at such a higher elevation than a lot of the other parts of the country. Amboseli gets a little bit warmer, but still gets colder at night. But then once we go to our final destination, Old-Kermatian, that is at the very bottom of this giant rift valley. So that's where we really start feeling some of the heat. During the day, as long as you can find some shade, it's usually still pretty tolerable because it's a pretty dry heat. Still can get up to about 90, 95, depending on when you're there. But once the sun goes down, it gets a little bit more manageable. Still, if you sleep warm, you might still be sleeping a little bit warm there, but I've been in other places where it's been much warmer. The activity level, I would say, is moderate. It's definitely not as strenuous as Chris was talking about with Borneo. Because it's Kenya, we have to be careful with large predators. So sometimes we spend more time in vehicles, but we are also doing some hikes out, like I mentioned, with the rangers, or when we're out with different teams at Soralo learning about their research. It's a mixture of being in vehicles and walking the landscape. We are outdoors basically the entire time. We are not in any enclosed structures, even kind of within Nairobi. We are in covered structures, but a lot of them are open air pretty much the entire course. And we do, like some others have mentioned, we have some early mornings because we're getting up to go spend time with researchers, but we're usually we don't have long nights, if that helps with anything. Lodging, we are in a tent the whole time. You are in shared tents. From where we stay our first night into Nairobi to Amboseli National Park to with Soralo, we are in tents. A varied version of tents. None I would say are like especially glamorous, but if you've gone camping, 2-person tent, good canvas sturdy tents, that is our home for about 9-10 days. We do have a mixture of Western toilets in some locations that are still fairly rustic, to sand toilets, or they dig a hole in the ground, put a plastic seat over it, put a little tent around you, and that is your toilet. Same with a shower and a bucket shower. So it does get fairly rustic, but most students actually really enjoy it. Simplicity is very nice. Our food, so what you see, those green tents in that photo, that's like a toilet and a shower. There you go. And the tents are exactly what our tent setup looks like. Food is a mixture of rice, lentils, chicken, stews, a lot of potatoes and cooked vegetables. I would say it's very vegetarian friendly, maybe even vegan friendly. If you have a lot of dietary limitations outside of those, gluten, dairy, or certain unique allergies, it might be a little bit tougher to source that, especially once we're far out of Nairobi. But that's why it's very important to put all of those limitations in your food preference sheets when you fill out paperwork for Miami, but also even before you sign up for courses. If you have major concerns, make sure you're talking to Project Dragonfly to make sure that Kenya or any of these other courses can accommodate those dietary restrictions. Last but not least, our transportation. We spend a little bit of time in a big overlander, like that big bus at the bottom of this photo, for our Amboseli, our national park time together, all in one big bus. Then we take that little charter flight, that little plane, to get over to our second location. And then when we're at that final location, we are mostly in smaller Land Rover, think safari type vehicle. And that's what we use to get around there and take us back to Nairobi. Phew. Sorry I chatted fast. I just wanted to get through that and open it up back to Jim.
Aaron, thank you so much. Sorry for you having to rush a little bit through the Kenya presentation. There was a question in the chat that I think you might be able to help with. But we just wanted to thank you. We appreciate you staying on a little extra time. Remember, if you're a current student, your placement for next year, your form to be filled out, those are due on the 11th, so that'll be here shortly. New students and alums, not until January. Our email address for Dragonfly, if you have questions, is there, and some of the websites that are helpful. We will stay on if you have any questions for a few minutes, if anyone has any personal questions, but we appreciate you showing up tonight and listening to us go through all these wonderful locations. And thank you, Chris and Courtney and Amy and Jaren, for presenting tonight and sharing your love for this program, because it, it's I wouldn't say addicting, but once you get started, it's hard to stop. So um, the power that it has on your life is truly amazing. So if anyone has any questions, please unmute yourself if you want, or you can throw it into chat. Otherwise, thank you, and hope to see you in a future program in one of those locations.
Thanks for organizing, Jim.
No problem. I'm going to stop recording.